Hey everybody, Marshall Apologist here again. I really don't make videos often, I know. Also, I'm going to cough a lot, and I'm going to try and edit that out a lot. I am still trying to get over a cold for 2 weeks now. But with everybody talking about abortion, I gotta throw like all 99 of my cents into the matter. Especially with Bill Nye. Bill Nye throwing out what I would throw out if I were a pro-choice person trying to intentionally strawman a pro-life person's position on abortion. And look, I'm a Christian. I don't make any, pretense that I'm not. But here's a few points right off the bat. Number one, I'm not against abortion because I'm a Christian. In point of fact, the Bible has remarkably little to say that informs me about what I should or should not think on the matter. I really just don't have a whole lot of verses that I can go to that are really going to amount to anything regarding abortion. Some people do. I think they're taking it way out of context. They're stretching it most of the time. There are a handful of things in the Bible that kind of support the idea that you really should not intentionally end the life of a child in the womb. I'm going to ignore all those, any and all of those, except for to say that the Bible confirms that you should like life, you should be life supportive, and that you should really hate murder and really hate any and all harm done to innocents, especially innocent children. Like hurting children is just like the worst of all possible things, and if, and only if, abortion is hurting an innocent child. It is truly one of the most disgustingly evil things a person can do. And I just don't feel bad for if someone goes into it with the mindset that that's what they're doing and they don't care, then I literally just don't care what bad thing happens to them in that process. It just doesn't matter to me at all. I'm sorry. If you knowingly go into an abortion, going, you know what, I think this is a human child growing in my womb, or if you're the doctor, a human child growing in the woman's womb, but screw that, I don't want this kid born, or I'm going to be complacent, or complicit rather, in allowing the kid to not be born. We're just going to take it out and let it die. At whatever stage. At whatever stage you think that it's a human being, and you're complicit in that in whatever fashion, just don't care. Don't care. Lightning can strike you. You could get smallpox. You could be butchered by sea pirates. It doesn't matter. I don't care what happens to you at that point. You are one of the most evil people to possibly have ever lived. And I just don't care. Okay, that's my hardline stance on the matter. Now, if you don't know that it's a person, if you don't consider it a child, if you truly don't think, excuse me, if you truly don't think what you're doing is killing a human child, fine, okay, I now do begin to care what happens to you. That having been said, that doesn't mean that I think that it should be okay and be legal. And here's the deal. For all the reasons that most people that I know who are pro-choice are pro-choice, for those same reasons I am against abortion. For instance, most people I know who are pro-choice take the position very clearly that because they aren't sure of exactly when a person in the womb should be considered a person, excuse me, whether it's the point of viability, some particular day, when they can feel pain, whatever the case may be. Because they aren't sure of when that is, they want to err to the side of allowing the woman to choose when she should get an abortion. At least up to like whatever standard they have. Generally it's viability, sometimes it's pain, sometimes it's other things. Whatever the case may be. And for those exact reasons, I am against abortion. Because I am not sure when a fetus should be considered a person for legal purposes. I think that we should err to the side of caution and say that it is always such, and you should always consider it a person, and it always has the right to live. It has the right to not be killed. It has the right to not be interfered with. Okay? Now here are some basic reasons as to why. And I'll get to Bill Nye's wildly crazy statements in a minute. Okay, so it's alive. Okay, we know that. Scientifically, by every conceivable definition you could throw at a fetus, it is alive. The moment the fertilized egg implants in the womb, from that point on, it's alive. It meets every scientific qualification for life. Period. Done. No argument. There's no argument to be had there at all, ever. No one can argue that. Okay? Number 2. It is 100% genetically human. And not just any human, a unique human. It will have 100% totally unique DNA, unless it's, part of a set of twins, in which case, they might have identical DNA. It depends on the kind of twin. The point is, DNA is human DNA. At any given point that you remove the fetus and you get a genetic sample from it, right? It will show up every time as human DNA. Period. And there's also no argument about that. So what we're dealing with is a living Homo sapien. Okay? No argument there. That is the only argument that exists there. Okay? So at that point, you have to start asking different kinds of questions. Because you're not asking what are you removing from a woman's womb. You are asking whether or not the living human that you're removing from the woman's womb should be considered a person. That is the question you need to ask. Although there are people that don't even care about that, and I'll get to them in a moment. The next thing you need to determine is, okay, well, when should it be considered a person? Okay, so you don't know when it should be considered a person. Nobody does. Science can't tell you when it's a person. That is beyond science. Person is not a scientific construct. It's a social construct. Okay? Personhood is not definable by science. Because personhood encapsulates so many things, biologically, philosophically, socially, so many different conceivable angles at which you can come at personhood, that it's just impossible. Now, I would say, if I were really interested in the matter, and really, you put a gun to my head and make me choose, I would say a person, a fully actualized person, properly defined, with all proper legal protections, is someone who has full cognitive capability to understand and comprehend the world around them and make decisions based on the stimulus of the world around them with their mind. Okay? Now, that having been said, that is why we do not consider children legal persons for the purpose of full legal protection. Right? We consider them persons for the purpose of keeping them from being murdered and the like. We do not consider them persons for the purpose of they are free, independent people who cannot be bound by another person to a location and so forth. So, for instance, I can ground my child to stay in their room, and there's no cop that can tell me I can't. Because they are not legal persons yet. They're not legal independent persons. So, if that's the definition of person, then, well, that doesn't really work until, depending on, a lot of, surrounding circumstances, they could be well into their mid to late teens before they're fully human persons. So, that definition doesn't really work for this purpose. But it kind of gives us a window into how we should treat a fetus at least in terms of should we be allowed to kill it? Because even though children aren't fully actualized persons for legal purposes, we still aren't allowed to kill them. So to that end, it still works fine for that, because for the same reasons. Christopher Hitchens is an atheist that once put it out there that even if killing a fetus, and I'm having to paraphrase a lot, but even if it is a fetus which is not a person proper, it is a potential person. It is a living human that is on its way to becoming a person. And so to interrupt that process is no less than murder itself, for the same reason that killing a current living adult person is robbing them of their potential future to live out as a more fully actualized person. So to that extent, sorry, I got a cough drop trying to move it around. I totally agree with Hitchens. That is one of the most succinct and probably elegant arguments I've ever heard concerning abortion from a non-religious perspective. It's actually quite brilliant. You can say what you want about Christopher Hitchens, especially if you're a Christian. The man was not stupid. He had some really bad arguments from time to time. He had a lot of emotional issues that I think kept him from being able to really rationally consider any arguments for the existence of God. But the man was not stupid. He wasn't a bad guy either. So it wasn't like he was a horribly immoral person either. So, not an immoral guy in particular, and not an idiot by virtually any definition. So for that purpose, yeah, I totally agree there with him. Now, I'm going to leave that for a moment because, if if you can't think that at least the point of viability you can't abort, then I'm just not on board. I'm sorry, I'm just not. There's nowhere to go from there. You're just a monster. Now, I don't like to just condense things down and just call people names, but I'm sorry, you're just an immoral monster. Okay. Now, if you want to say it's at the point of pain and not viability, well, that pushes it back quite a lot farther than 21 weeks, because pain is felt a good deal before then. But whatever. I will say this much. From ever, recorded history and before, when a woman discovers that she is pregnant and then miscarries, near universal to that experience of a miscarriage is sadness, sometimes depression, both for the mother and for everybody else. And we still refer to her as a mother, even if she miscarries and never has another child. At that time, it is a mother that miscarries. Why? Because she had a child. Because instinctively, we don't just look at a miscarriage and say, oh, that's so sad because I was going to have a baby, but now I'm not. That's part of it. It's part of the robbing you of your future that you would build a sudden amount of hope into. Assuming you wanted the child, I guess. And most people do. But it is innate in human nature to also look at that situation and say, I lost my baby in the womb. My baby died in the womb. That is a completely normal, human, and universal to every culture that has ever existed kind of reaction. Now, granted, that's an emotional reaction. That's an instinctive reaction. It's not a logical reaction, necessarily. But I don't think it should be discounted entirely. Because I think what abortion effectively does is it actually kind of robs the grown people in the situation of their humanity by trying to take away from them the seriousness of what's going on. You're trying to educate yourself out of, your typical normal human experience, and that's probably not a good idea, psychologically speaking and sociologically speaking. Now, on to Bill Nye's idiocy. And I do mean idiocy, because one of the arguments he brought up was, well, if abortion is killing a person, well then, gosh golly, every time a woman miscarries, well, she should be put in jail. And it's like, no. I'm sorry. There's a huge difference in nature taking its course, such as a birth defect, some sort of deformity, some sort of abnormality, genetically, that makes the baby unviable, in or out of the womb, and causes it to die, or so the conflation of a natural process, however unfortunate it may be, with an intentional, just totally unnatural process of purposely ending a life, using your will, using your tools, going out of your way to then end that life. These are obviously drastically uncomparable things. That is not apples and oranges. That is apples and Buicks. It's not even in the universe of the same kind of thought. So to say, and then he goes on to say, something like, every time a man has sex and the egg isn't fertilized, that should be considered abortion. Which is nobody makes that argument. Again, I wouldn't make either of those arguments unless I was severely, if I was a Poe, I might make that argument. If I was pretending to be pro-choice and wanted the pro-choice crowd to look really stupid, I might make those arguments. I just can't even imagine why somebody would do something like that. Why would you blatantly mischaracterize somebody's position so badly? And I don't think Bill Nye's a dumb guy. I'm sorry. He's a liar. The option is between him being just grotesquely immoral for political and social gain, and him being that stupid. That is the kind of argument that the dumbest 3 or 4 people I've ever met in my life, and I'm including the thousands I've run across on the internet, that would be the top 3 or 4 dumbest people I've ever met would make that argument. And I don't think he's that dumb. I think he's just saying something that he knows is not true and mischaracterizing people for political and personal financial gain. Hate me if you want to, because Bill Nye's got a lot of fans in the world, and I don't care. I'm calling him a liar. If Bill Nye sees this video, I would be more than happy to get on a public debate forum with him and school him as to why that is the dumbest pro-choice argument that has ever existed in the history of anything ever. That is probably the dumbest argument for or against anything that has ever existed. I can't believe anybody would even take the time to write that down and then stand up in front of a camera and then say it without realizing, man, that was dumb. No, I gotta rewrite that. That's stupid. Everything I just said was just wrong. I don't understand how anybody could possibly do that. So no, I don't think he's dumb. I don't think he's dumb. I think he knows exactly what he said. And I think he knows why he said it. And then he finishes it with a very typical thing that isn't nearly as dumb, but it's pretty bad when you think about it, which is, I think we should just leave it up to women. Okay, well, first of all, roughly speaking, half the people who are pro-life are women. So there's that. If not more, if you polled globally. But never minding that is such a stupid kind of a position to hold. It's like saying women aren't allowed to have opinions about penile cancer because they don't have penises. Of course women can have opinions about penile cancer. They're human beings. They have empathy. Believe it or not, I actually have empathy. I know this because when my child cries, I feel bad. Along with him. Like, I understand why he's crying, usually. Sometimes I have no idea. And neither does he, but that's fine. Because he's 4. But, I don't know, still, like, I do actually have empathy, and I have sympathy, and I can imagine myself in that position, and I have had bad things happen to me, and, like, I can imagine, like, being in an unfortunate circumstance, just like somebody else can. It'd be like saying, oh, you shouldn't have an opinion about bullying unless you're either a bully or a victim of bullying. Well, that's dumb. Of course you can. Even if you've never been bullied and you've never been a bully, of course you can have an opinion about bullying. Now, you may not have quite the most nuanced, insightful view on it ever, or perhaps you do because you've studied it in depth and talked to many, many people about it. Could be. But you're still allowed to have an opinion about it. And this is a matter of whether somebody... This is a very cut and dry matter. It's either a person and should be treated as such and kept alive at virtually all costs. Not literally all costs, but virtually all costs. Or it isn't a person at all, in which case there's absolutely nothing wrong with abortion. It's fine. We should probably have more of them. And everybody that doesn't like it is just not liking it because they don't understand that it's not a person. Like, those are really your only options. Now, to the last group of people who are for abortion, who literally don't care, and I've seen people say it, so I have been told this to my face, so don't tell me these people don't exist, because they do. People will say that even if it's a person, and should be granted rights, and should be saved, if the woman doesn't want it in her body, it's her body, therefore she should choose to eject it. And basically they compare it, not completely insanely, to a house. Right? Like, this is my house. All this right here. That's my house. And if somebody were to be in my house, and I don't want them in my house anymore, I can eject them from my house. And that's just it, because it's just mine. Okay? Now, here's where you start to run into moral issues. Okay? This is indeed my house, and if someone were to break into my house, I could kick them out. Okay? And I may even have a moral impetus that demands that I do so. It's very possible. It, however, is below 30 degrees Celsius outside. So, if I were to engage in some activity where someone were to be allowed into my house, right, and it were minus 30 outside, and this person has no way to stay warm outside, they have nowhere to go, and we'll just say for the sake of argument that outside of my house is an absolute snow-covered wasteland for miles and miles with no sources of heat at all. It's not the case in a city, but if it were, and I were to kick this person out of my house, and they were to freeze to death, not 1 mile away, because that's as far as they got before the hypothermia set in and they died, or passed out. I'm sorry, but whether I'm legally liable in that situation or not, I am definitely morally liable for that person's death, because I sent them out of a safe environment that I had the right to send them out of to a very unsafe environment, and provided that, they weren't doing anything to me willingly, at any rate, to harm me or anyone or anything in my house, for me to send them out is basically me murdering them. That's how it is. If you were standing outside and one of your neighbors from however far away were standing there with you talking in your yard, and somebody had dropped some kind of poison gas bomb nearby, and you had to suddenly run into the house to stay safe from the poison gas. And while the gas cloud was outside, you decide, I'm going to kick them out of my house. I'm going to open the door real quick, throw him outside, and slam the door shut, and get away from the door so I don't breathe the poison gas. But, every man for himself, and it's my house, it's my right, I can just throw him out. No, I'm sorry. You're liable for killing that person. You may not have, set up the circumstance. You may not be responsible for any of that. It may very well be your house, but you nevertheless are responsible for that person's death. Maybe not legally, maybe legally, it depends. But certainly, morally speaking, you're absolutely responsible for that person dying. And you just are. No matter what the law is, morally, I am going to treat you like you're a murderous, monstrous scumbag. Forever. And I will never apologize for it unless you have seriously repented of that. Like, you have to do some real soul searching on that one. And then I can be like, okay, fine. You've asked, God and everyone to forgive you of that terrible, egregious thing that you've done to somebody. Then okay, then I can forgive you of that too. Not a problem. But, sorry, cough drop. But yeah, no, I'm sorry. If it's a person, you can't send it outside of your body. You can't, because outside of your body is death. Assured, guaranteed death. Now, if at some point we make artificial wombs that you can take a fetus out at any given point, put it in the artificial womb, and it will grow into a fully developed human being, and you want to sign all your rights away as a parent, then I'm totally on board, and we can just make abortion illegal, and we can just have everybody grow up in an artificial womb. Yeah, that'll put all kinds of societal strain on things. Hopefully birth control will be, up to snuff at that point, and people will stop being so stupid as to have massive amounts of casual sex for absolutely no good reason other than it feels good, because people will hopefully be a little bit less selfish at some point in the future. Doesn't look like it's going to go that way anytime soon, but maybe. Because I'm sorry, just casual sex for the sake of casual sex, especially without any protection or any emotional attachment to somebody, yeah, maybe it's your right. It's perfectly legal to do, that's certainly true, but it still isn't a good thing for you or society. You're putting a burden on everybody by doing that, and that's just not a good idea. I'm sorry, it's just not, and that's why it's immoral in virtually every religion. But I guess I digress on that point, but that's kind of how that's kind of like the double-barrel shotgun approach for me in abortion. I don't know when exactly it should be considered a person. Therefore, it should be considered a person at the earliest possible time that you can differentiate it from the mother's body. And that is basically point blank on insemination. At a bare minimum, it is implantation. And people really need to stop with the identity politics of the matter and saying people shouldn't have a position on the matter unless they're a woman. It's a bad argument. It's a bad argument every time it's used. It doesn't matter what the topic is. It's always a bad argument. Always has been, always will be, for everything you can possibly imagine. And yeah, no, the abortion law in New York is very distressful, and it should be. It should be very distressful for everybody. There are a ton of very pro-choice people who are just aghast at the levels of pro-infanticide that people are harping on now. And I think that's great. I think that's great because, frankly, that is one step closer to pro-life. When the full, thoroughly thought-out position of being pro-abortion comes out, and basically the logical end is, as it has always been, that we should be able to kill people who are a drain on society, which is, by the way, the argument of, well, if we don't abort them, they'll all just go to adoption centers. Isn't that terrible? But Republicans should only want to make abortion illegal if they want to give tons of extra tax money to adoption care centers and such. And if they don't want to do that, then they're just hypocrites. No, what they want to do is have somebody live. Okay, point blank, straight up, first stop, live. Okay, like, it's always better. It's always better to be alive than dead. I suppose they're, I guess, unless you're living a really tortured existence. But as somebody who knows people who were adopted, they are very happy to be alive, and they're pretty much always glad they weren't dead. They're glad they weren't stillbirthed. They're glad that they weren't aborted. They didn't always have the best time in life, but the alternative is considerably worse. And all these same arguments that can apply to abortion can continually be applied to people who are in comas. They can be extrapolated out into getting rid of the elderly and the sick and the disabled and the mentally handicapped, and eugenics arguments. And Planned Parenthood started this eugenics organization. This isn't new. They're just hiding it. Like, I've said too much. Like, I'm sorry, abortion is one of the least defensible things on the earth. It may not have been at one point in time when so little information was really understood about the human, birthing process, but we know a lot now. We know so much more, so many ultrasounds. People are kind of weirdly 3D printing their ultrasounds. Looks weird, looks kind of gross. But it's not a perfect... Ultrasounds are not a perfect picture of what the baby looks like. So it makes it just... It's a little weird looking to start with. It makes it look extra weird when it's just from an ultrasound. But, people are very quickly figuring out, hey, no, this is a little human baby. Like, man, you hear that heartbeat? Man, you hear that little baby heartbeat. First time ever. It's just... I'm not trying to smile. I can't help it. I heard that little heartbeat. 2 little boys sleeping upstairs right now. Man, cost me a lot of money. Frustrate me to no end. It's good for me. It was really good for me. Because, the world doesn't revolve around me. I know my world revolves around, to a large extent, them now. Like, you can become a parent, you don't have your own time. Not really. Nah, you get a little bit of that. Maybe if you get an hour a day, you're real lucky. But those little boys, shoot, I wouldn't trade that for anything. Those little guys are amazing. Every little thing they do. My littlest guy was born in May. Like, just watching him try to army crawl, pick up that little soother, stick it in his mouth, remember that he needs to let go. Like, I mean, that's nothing. That's nothing for me. Man, that's so much for him. It's fantastic. But you hear that little heartbeat. You see that little baby in there. Oh, man, seeing him move around. That's a miracle beyond miracles right there. Just as much as if someone hurt them right now, someone breaks into my house, hurts my boys. As wrathful, as hateful as I would be to that person, man, if somebody had come along and caused my wife to miscarry on purpose, then exactly the same. No, you wouldn't get any pity out of me. I would throw my whole soul at you, to hurt you, to get back at you. I'm not saying it's morally right, but it's what I would do. I'm a dad. It's my job. You hurt my boys, I'm coming after you. Nothing's going to stop me. And it wouldn't matter if they were born or not. That's my baby. Don't you dare hurt my baby. And, it's almost, you can't, but it's almost like you should make somebody make them carry to term the first time they're pregnant, and then maybe let them have an abortion after that. I don't like that. That's a stupid law for a lot of reasons, but I about guarantee you, if that was the law, if that was what was allowed to happen, then, man, we would see so many fewer abortions. It's not even funny. There are very, very remarkably few people who have a baby and then abort later. And there's a reason for that. But, like I said, I've said way too much. This thing's incredibly long. Stop having bad arguments. Stop it. And stop saying stupid stuff like the only reason you were against abortion is because of the Bible. Dude, there are people of all kinds of religions and non-religions all over the world who have no respect for the Bible. Some people are anti, they're I don't want to say, the word keeps coming to mind, antithetical, but that's not right. They're hostile to the Bible, even. And they're just like, yeah, but abortion's still, like, wrong. It's horrible. Like, the idea that there are no irreligious arguments on it, that's not true. It's blatantly false. And the only people who would say that are people who are either grotesquely ignorant, and you shouldn't listen to those people, or who are liars, and you shouldn't listen to them either. So, knock it off. You guys have a nice night.